Have you ever noticed your cat acting strange? Running around the house for no apparent reason, hiding under the sofa, or perhaps letting out anxious meows by the door. And then, a few hours later, a thunderstorm hits, or even worse, an earthquake strikes. You've probably heard the stories that cats are living barometers and seismographs, capable of predicting natural disasters. But what is this really? An ancient myth? A lucky coincidence? Or is there actual science behind it? Today, we're going to separate the folklore from the facts and figure out if cats can truly predict the future. I promise the answer will surprise you, because the key lies not in magic, but in the astonishing biology of these creatures. Are you ready to uncover the secret your furry friend is hiding? The belief that animals can sense disaster is as old as time itself. As far back as 373 BCE, the Greek historian Thucydides wrote that rats, weasels and snakes fled the city of Helicon mass just days before it was destroyed by a powerful earthquake and tsunami. For centuries, sailors brought cats aboard, not just to control rodents, but also as a living talisman, capable of warning them of an approaching storm. These tales have been passed down through generations, gathering legends and mystical details along the way. They are so deeply ingrained in our culture that even today, many people are absolutely convinced of their pets' prophetic abilities. But ancient folklore is one thing, scientific evidence is quite another. Let's delve into this topic and see what modern science has to say about feline superpowers. So, let's kick things off with the weather. The most widespread myth claims that a cat can actually predict rain or a thunderstorm. People often say if a cat sneezes, rain is coming. If it curls up tight, hiding its nose, it means colder weather. And if it meticulously cleans its ears, get ready for precipitation. At first glance, these just seem like old superstitions with no basis in reality. However, if we dig a little deeper, we can find a perfectly logical explanation for this behaviour, one rooted in physics, not mystery. Cats are incredibly sensitive creatures. Their bodies can detect the slightest environmental shifts that remain completely imperceptible to humans. Their behaviour isn't some prophecy of the future. It's simply a reaction to what is happening right here, right now, just on a level beyond our own perception. Let's break down exactly which physical phenomena they sense just before the weather shifts. A crucial weather factor is atmospheric pressure. It tends to drop sharply right before a thunderstorm or a hurricane. We humans barely notice this change. Perhaps the most weather-sensitive among us might feel a slight headache. For a cat, however, it's a highly noticeable shift. The secret lies in the structure of their inner ear. This organ is far more sensitive than ours, managing not only hearing, but also their sense of balance. A rapid drop in pressure causes physical discomfort in this area. It's similar to the feeling we get during the takeoff or landing of an airplane. The cat starts to feel uneasy and may become restless. Some will vigorously lick their paws and rub their ears, instinctively trying to equalize the pressure and relieve the unpleasant sensation. So, next time you see your cat excessively grooming or washing their face right before a storm, they aren't predicting rain. They are simply trying to cope with the discomfort in their ears. Another key factor here is static electricity. The air right before a storm becomes highly charged, literally crackling with electricity. The level of ionization rises significantly, and this has a direct impact on the cat's coat. You've probably noticed this phenomenon in the winter, when the air is dry, and your pet's fur might spark and crackle when you stroke them. Before a thunderstorm, the exact same thing happens, just on a massive scale. Every single strand of fur accumulates a static charge. For a cat, this feeling is incredibly unpleasant. Imagine your own hair constantly standing on end and giving you a tiny shock with every slight movement you make. That is essentially the sensation your cat experiences. This causes intense irritation and discomfort, sometimes leading to itching. The cat attempts to alleviate this discomfort through excessive grooming, or by seeking out hiding spots where the static charge might be lower. So, the next time your pet suddenly gets nervous and hides under the bed, remember, they might not just be scared of the thunder, they could be actively trying to escape the omnipresent electrical buzz in the air. We shouldn't overlook the phenomenal feline sense of smell. A cat's nose is roughly 14 times more powerful than a human's. They are capable of detecting scents whose very existence we are completely unaware of. Before a rainstorm, chemical changes occur in the atmosphere. The wind carries the distinct scents of damp earth and ozone, a gas produced by electrical discharges from lightning. Cats can pick up this characteristic smell of the storm long before the first raindrop falls. For them, it is just as clear a signal of impending rain as the sight of dark clouds on the horizon is for us. Their sense of smell acts like a high-precision chemical analyzer, reporting on changes in the atmosphere's composition ahead of time. This is another crucial element in the puzzle that helps explain their so-called predictive abilities. They are simply analysing the odours the wind carries and drawing their own conclusions. To wrap up this discussion on weather, we can confidently state that cats do not predict the weather in any mystical sense of the word. They aren't seeing the future. They are simply incredibly adept at sensing the present. Their bodies are complex biological sensor systems, reacting instantly to drops in atmospheric pressure, increases in static electricity, and subtle changes in air sense. What seems like superstition or a funny old wives' tale to us is, for them, a direct physical reaction to changing environmental conditions. They literally feel the approach of a storm with their skin, their ears, and their nose. So, the next time your cat starts behaving unusually, don't rush to call her an oracle. Instead, think of her as a highly sensitive, furry little weather station, complete with paws and a tail, simply informing you about what's already taking place in the atmosphere. Let's shift our focus now to a far more serious and, frankly, terrifying subject: earthquakes. While predicting rain is a relatively straightforward affair, seismic activity is infinitely more complex and dramatically unpredictable. Tales of animals sensing danger and fleeing before an earthquake strike have appeared in the historical records of countless civilizations. The most famous modern example, and the one most frequently cited, occurred in the Chinese city of Haicheng in 1975. Concerned by a series of minor tremors and the highly unusual behavior of local animals, specifically panic-stricken cats, authorities made the unprecedented decision to evacuate nearly 1 million residents. The very next day, the city was devastated by a massive 7.3 magnitude earthquake. This event has gone down in history as perhaps the only successful short-term earthquake prediction ever recorded. But was this truly a triumph of scientific forecasting, or merely an incredible stroke of luck? And perhaps more importantly, what exact role did the cats play? To understand how a cat might sense an earthquake, we first need to delve a little into seismology. An earthquake isn't an instantaneous event. It's preceded by a whole series of complex processes. When tectonic plates shift, they generate several different types of seismic waves. The first waves to spread out from the epicenter are the so-called P waves, or primary waves. They essentially compress and stretch the rock in the direction they are moving. These waves move incredibly fast, nearly twice as fast as the main, destructive S waves or secondary waves. P waves are typically too weak for humans to perceive. For us, the earthquake often seems to start suddenly, only when those powerful S waves arrive. But for animals which possess much finer sensory perception, these initial weak signals can be quite noticeable. They serve as a crucial early warning system for the approaching disaster. This brings us to one of the cat's greatest strengths, its phenomenal hearing. The human ear can typically perceive sounds ranging from about 20 Hz up to 20 kHz. Cats, however, operate in a much wider spectrum, from 45 Hz all the way up to 64 kHz. This means they can pick up ultrasound, frequencies that are completely undetectable to us. It's widely believed that the process of rock fracturing deep underground, which precedes an earthquake, generates high-frequency sounds. Cats can clearly hear this cracking and grinding sound far beneath the surface. Furthermore, they are also sensitive to infrasound, the low-frequency vibrations that are generated by P waves. Because of this unique sensitivity, a cat can literally hear, an approaching earthquake dozens of seconds, or even a full minute, before we ever feel the first tremors. However, hearing isn't the only thing they rely on. Cats possess another incredible sensory organ, their vibrissae, commonly known as whiskers. These are far more than mere decoration. You find whiskers not just on the muzzle, but also on the chin, above the eyes, and surprisingly, even on the backs of their front legs. Each individual whisker is rooted deep within an area, rich in both muscle tissue and complex nerve endings. This structure makes the vibrissae incredibly sensitive, able to detect the slightest shifts in air movement and subtle ground vibrations. They function as crucial tactile sensors, enabling the cat to navigate space, hunt effectively in the dark, and accurately judge whether an opening is wide enough to squeeze through. When faint P waves, the initial shock waves, often preceding an earthquake, pass through the earth, they create almost imperceptible vibrations that travel easily through floors and walls. While humans wouldn't feel a thing, the cat's sensitive vibrissae instantly register these minute movements, sending an immediate warning signal to the brain. This instinctively prompts the animal to seek a safe place. And don't underestimate the remarkable sensitivity of a cat's paws. The paw pads are packed with an enormous number of nerve receptors, including Pacinian corpuscles, which are specialized for perceiving vibrations. This ability is crucial for hunting, allowing them to sense the slightest movement of their quarry. But this same remarkable feature can also serve as a natural early warning system for an earthquake. Lying on the floor, a cat feels vibrations emanating from the ground with its entire body, especially its sensitive paws. Those faint P waves, the ones we completely ignore, are a distinct signal to the cat that something is seriously amiss beneath their feet. This unnatural sensation likely triggers intense stress and panic, sending them scrambling frantically in search of an escape. They don't understand what's happening, but their primal instincts scream one thing: danger! Get out! However, even more controversial theories are actively being discussed within the scientific community. One such theory involves changes in the Earth's electromagnetic field. Some researchers hypothesize that the immense stress and tension within bedrock immediately preceding an earthquake may generate localized shifts in the magnetic field. It is further hypothesized that certain animals, particularly migratory birds and marine mammals, can sense these fluctuations and utilize them for navigation. Could cats possess a similar sensitivity? While direct evidence is currently lacking, the possibility cannot be ruled out. If this mechanism is at play, a cat might perceive not only subtle vibrations and sounds, but also the invisible energy fields that shift dramatically just before a catastrophic event. This could potentially account for the documented instances of anomalous behavior observed hours or even days preceding an earthquake. Another hypothesis focuses on chemical changes. When rocks are subjected to immense pressure, chemical reactions can occur, causing various gases, such as radon, to be released into the atmosphere. The chemical composition of groundwater might also shift. While these changes might seem minuscule to us, they could be highly noticeable to an animal with a keen sense of smell, like a cat. A sudden influx of unusual, perhaps alarming, subterranean odours might serve as another distinct warning signal. The cat may not consciously understand the source of the smell, but its instinct would immediately recognise it as a sign of imminent danger or threat. While this theory certainly requires further investigation, it fits neatly into the broader framework of animal hypersensitivity and advanced sensory perception. So if cats possess all these sensors, why haven't scientists managed to use them to predict earthquakes yet? The main hurdle we run into here is the classic issue of proof and reproducibility. Science relies on hard facts and statistics, not just isolated incidents or single cases. While there is plenty of anecdotal evidence, there's no way to reliably verify it. The key difficulty is that cats act strangely for a huge variety of reasons. A cat might zoom around the house simply because it has a burst of energy, or maybe a loud noise outside startled it, or perhaps it's experiencing pain. We simply cannot link its behaviour to an impending earthquake with 100% certainty. Scientific proof demands controlled experiments, something that is virtually impossible when dealing with naturally occurring earthquakes. Nevertheless, researchers did attempt to systematize these observations. Take Japan, for example. As a country frequently hit by earthquakes, scientists there have repeatedly tried to develop a monitoring system based on animal behavior. In one experiment, they fitted cats with specialized collars equipped with activity sensors. The goal was to track sudden spikes of unusual behavior and correlate them directly with seismic data. However, the results were mixed. While increased activity was observed before tremors in some instances, there were also numerous false alarms, times when the cats acted agitated, but no quake followed. Furthermore, some earthquakes occurred with absolutely no preliminary reaction from the animals whatsoever. Ultimately, none of these systems demonstrated sufficient reliability to be adopted for practical use. Let's go back to the Haicheng incident in China. Many seismologists now believe that the evacuation was triggered less by animal behavior and more by a series of increasingly strong preliminary tremors, the so-called foreshocks. The abnormal behavior of animals was simply one of many factors taken into account. In other words, the earthquake wasn't predicted by animals, but by humans who, observing a complex set of signs, made a correct, albeit risky, call. This story became more of an exception that proves the rule than concrete proof of a reliable animal-based prediction method. The success in Haicheng generated a certain euphoria, sparking hope that the key to predicting disasters had finally been found. Unfortunately, subsequent events failed to bear this out. In stark and tragic contrast to the Haicheng story, the Tangshan earthquake struck just 1 year later, in 1976. It quickly became one of the deadliest disasters of the 20th century, claiming an estimated 240,000 to 650,000 lives. Unlike Haicheng, the Tangshan quake was not preceded by a series of noticeable foreshocks. Consequently, there were no widespread reports of anomalous animal behavior either. The catastrophe hit suddenly, catching everyone completely off guard. This incident clearly demonstrated that relying on animals as a sole warning system is highly unreliable. If that method worked consistently, a tragedy of this magnitude could certainly have been avoided. But unfortunately, the nature of earthquakes is far more complex. It doesn't always broadcast signals that even the most sensitive creatures can pick up. We also need to touch upon the psychological aspect here, specifically the cognitive distortion known as confirmation bias. Our brains are wired to seek out and remember information that confirms our existing beliefs while conveniently ignoring anything that contradicts them. If your cat behaves strangely right before an earthquake, you will remember that single instance for the rest of your life as proof of its psychic abilities. However, you'll likely disregard and quickly forget the dozens of other times the cat acted exactly the same way, and yet absolutely nothing happened. We selectively register the hits and ignore the misses, creating an illusion of a pattern where none actually exists. This particular distortion is the foundation for many myths and superstitions, including those about cats acting as predictors. There's also a zoopsychological perspective to consider. Cats are highly empathetic creatures, incredibly sensitive to their owner's emotional state. It's possible that in some cases they aren't reacting to the impending event at all, but rather to our anxiety. We might not consciously realize it, but our bodies can pick up the very first, faintest rumbles. Our subconscious registers this immediately, triggering a small jolt of adrenaline and a subtle sense of unease. A cat is always watching us, and it instantly picks up on these non-verbal cues: tension in our voice, dilated pupils, or a rapid heart rate. When the cat sees that its owner, its ultimate source of security, is worried, it naturally begins to panic too. This creates a potential chain reaction. We react to the earthquake, and the cat reacts to our reaction. So, what does this all boil down to? Can cats predict earthquakes? The answer is both yes and no. The no part applies to the mystical sense. Cats aren't clairvoyant. They aren't looking into the future. They have no idea that the ground is about to shake in the next minute. But the yes applies to the physical reality, their biology, Their hyper-developed senses, hearing, touch, and perhaps even smell, allow them to pick up the very earliest physical precursors of an earthquake. These are things like P waves, subtle vibrations, and sounds that are completely imperceptible to humans. They aren't predicting. They are detecting the actual start of the event several tens of seconds before we do. Their panic isn't a prophecy. It's just an instinctive reaction to a real threat that has already begun, but which we haven't yet perceived. It's not a superpower. It's super senses. And that, perhaps, is the most profound and astonishing finding of our research. The truth turns out to be far more fascinating than any myth. Our cats aren't magical beings. They are perfectly engineered biological machines, the culmination of millions of years of evolution. Their abilities are not witchcraft, but the glorious triumph of physics and biology. They hear the inaudible, sense the intangible, and pick up scents that simply don't exist for us. They inhabit a totally different sensory world, one that is infinitely richer and more detailed than ours. Their so-called predictions are merely a side effect of their incredible sensitivity to the environment. So the next time your pet starts behaving strangely, take a moment and observe closely. Perhaps they are trying to tell you something, not about the future, but about the present, about what is happening in the world right now, just beyond the edges of your perception. So, let's summarise. We've established that the myths surrounding cats being fortune tellers are actually rooted in hard science. They truly can foresee weather shifts by reacting to drops in barometric pressure, static electricity, and subtle changes in scent. They are also often the first to notice an impending earthquake, picking up those faint P waves using their ultrasensitive hearing, whiskers, and the pads of their paws. The crucial distinction here, however, is reacting, not predicting. They aren't seeing the future. They are simply perceiving the present moment far more comprehensively and subtly than we ever could. Their world is rich with sounds, vibrations, and signals that remain completely undetectable to us. There's absolutely no magic involved, just astonishingly perfect biology. Thank you so much for sticking with us until the end. Hopefully, you learned something new and fascinating about your furry neighbours here on Earth. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next investigations. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever noticed your cat behaving oddly right before a thunderstorm, an earthquake, or some other major event? Share your stories in the comments below. I'm genuinely interested in reading what you've observed.